The moment I saw the balance on my screen, I thought the app had glitched. Lambai isa yuan. That was all that remained in the account I had been building for 5 years. The account that held $67,400, 48 hours ago, every dollar I had saved since I was 26 years old. Working double shifts at the hospital, skipping vacations, eating lunch at my desk for 3 years straight, all of it gone. And my sister was standing in her kitchen not 15 feet away from me, refilling her coffee like it was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning after Christmas. I remember the exact way the light looked in that kitchen. The garland above the window was still up. There were candy cane mugs on the counter and a dish towel shaped like a reindeer hanging on the oven handle. The smell of cinnamon from the night before still sat in the air, and I stood in the doorway of the guest room in my socks, staring at my phone, completely still, while my entire future quietly dissolved off the screen. I had driven 4 hours to spend Christmas with my family. I had wrapped presents and brought my sister's favorite wine and stayed up until midnight helping her put together a toy kitchen for her youngest. I had done everything right. I always did everything right. And while I slept in her guest room on a mattress that was slightly too soft, someone had drained every cent I had. I set my phone face down on the nightstand. I took 3 slow breaths. Then I picked it up again and looked at the transaction history. 14 transfers, all executed between 11 p.m. on Christmas night and 4 a.m. the morning after. Each one moving between $3,000 and $6,000 to an account I didn't recognize. The transfers were staggered just enough apart to avoid triggering the automatic fraud alert my bank had in place for large single withdrawals. Whoever did this knew exactly how the system worked. I had added my sister to that account 4 years ago when our mother had a stroke. I needed someone with access in case something happened to me while I was at the hospital with Mom and couldn't manage the bills remotely. It was a practical decision. A temporary one. I had meant to remove her access after everything stabilized. I never did. I walked to the bathroom and ran cold water over my wrists. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. Then I dried my hands, put my phone in my pocket, and went to the kitchen. She was wearing a green Christmas sweater, and her hair was in a ponytail, and she handed me a mug of coffee with both hands and said, "Morning, sleepyhead, you want eggs?" I said yes. I sat down at her kitchen island and I watched her crack eggs into a pan, and I did not say a single word about what I had just seen. I talked about how well her kids had slept. I talked about the drive home. I helped her wash the breakfast dishes and I hugged her goodbye, and I loaded my bag into my car and I backed out of her driveway, and I did not cry until I got to the gas station 2 miles away. Then I sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes and I let myself fall apart completely. And when I was done, I started making calls. Let me go back, because you need to understand who my sister is before any of this makes sense. My sister is 4 years older than me. She is charming in a way that has always made rooms turn toward her, the kind of person who laughs at exactly the right moment and remembers every detail about you and makes you feel seen. Growing up, I worshipped her. She was the one who taught me how to do my hair, who stayed up with me the night before my nursing boards, who called me every Sunday for years, regardless of what was happening in her own life. She is also someone who has never once in her adult life lived within her means. That is not a small detail. It is the architecture of everything that came later. Her husband had a decent salary in pharmaceutical sales, but they had a house that stretched it, 2 cars that required it, a lifestyle that consumed all of it and then some. They took vacations I would never have been able to afford. Her kids were in private school. She had a standing appointment at a salon that cost more per month than my grocery budget. I never judged it. It was her life. But I noticed, over the years, the small ways money came up between us. She borrowed $800 from me when I was 24 and never mentioned it again. When her youngest was born and they had unexpected medical bills, I gave her $1,500 as a gift, no expectation of return. When her car needed a repair she hadn't budgeted for, she called me first. I helped every time. She was my sister. What I did not fully let myself acknowledge, until I was sitting in that gas station parking lot with mascara on my cheeks, was that she had never once helped me in return. Not financially, not in any material way. She showed up with a casserole when I had my wisdom teeth out. She sent flowers when I got promoted. But when I was between apartments and needed a place to stay for 3 weeks, she said it wasn't a good time. When I had a car accident 2 years ago and the rental was costing me more than I could absorb, she expressed sympathy very warmly and did not offer anything else. I had told myself these things were incidental, that she would be there if I truly needed her. I had told myself a story about my sister that was, it turns out, entirely the story I wanted to believe. The $67,400 was my down payment. I had been pre-approved for a mortgage on a small house in a neighborhood I loved. I had found the listing 3 weeks before Christmas. I was going to make an offer in January. I had a folder on my desktop with the floor plans and a note to myself about which bedroom would be the office and which one I'd paint yellow. I had never told my sister any of this. Not because I was hiding it. I had just been waiting until it was real, until the paperwork was signed, until I had something solid to show. That was a mistake I will spend a long time thinking about. I called my bank from the gas station and reported the unauthorized transfers. They put a hold on the account and opened a fraud investigation immediately. The representative walked me through the process with professional calm, and when he told me the transfers had been initiated through online banking using login credentials, I asked him to look at the IP address attached to the logins. He paused. He said he could see in the notes that the IP address was flagged as residential, not from my usual access location. I asked him whether the IP address matched any location associated with the authorized secondary account holder. There was a longer pause. He said he wasn't able to confirm that information directly, but that the fraud team would review all access records as part of the investigation. He told me that if I believed I knew who had initiated the transfers, I should also contact law enforcement. I thanked him and hung up. Then I called my cousin. My cousin is 2 years younger than me and works in cybersecurity. She is one of the most methodical people I know, and she is the only family member I trusted completely in that moment. She picked up on the second ring. I told her what happened in 4 sentences. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Don't confront her yet. Don't do anything yet. Give me 24 hours. I asked her what she was going to do. She said, "I'm going to help you build something you can actually use." I drove home. I sat on my couch. I did not call my sister, did not text her, did not post anything, did not tell anyone except my cousin. I ordered Thai food I barely ate, and I opened a new notes document on my laptop, and I started writing down every financial transaction I could remember between my sister and me, going back 10 years. Dates, amounts, what she'd said, what I had assumed. I wrote for 3 hours. The document was longer than I expected. My cousin called me the next evening. She had done some background work she would not tell me exactly how, and I would not ask, and she told me that the destination account for the transfers was a recently opened joint savings account, opened 3 weeks before Christmas. The account holder information she had found pointed toward my sister's husband's name, with a secondary holder. I absorbed that for a moment. Then I said, "She planned this before I even arrived." My cousin said, "That's what it looks like." I cried again that night. Not from grief, or not only from grief. From the strange and disorienting experience of understanding that something you believed was solid had never been solid at all. My sister had sat across from me at Christmas dinner and passed me the rolls, and laughed at her husband's joke about the dog and asked me what my New Year's plans were, and she had already moved my money. She had already done it, and she smiled and hugged me goodbye, and I drove 4 hours home thinking about how good it had been to see her. I made an appointment with an attorney 3 days after Christmas. I chose someone who specialized in civil fraud and financial crimes, a woman I found through a recommendation from a colleague at the hospital who had gone through a difficult divorce involving hidden assets. I sent the attorney a summary document before our meeting, 9 pages, everything I had, organized chronologically. She called me the afternoon before our appointment and said, "You've done a lot of my work for me already." I told her I was a nurse. I said, "We are trained to document everything." She said that would serve me well. In the meeting, she laid out the legal landscape with the kind of direct clarity I needed. What my sister had done was bank fraud and theft by unauthorized access. The fact that she had been added as an authorized user on the account did not give her the right to transfer funds to her self-authorized access for emergency purposes, with no written agreement, does not constitute permission to liquidate the account. The staggered transfer pattern would likely be interpreted as deliberate circumvention of fraud detection, which elevated the seriousness of the offense. The attorney said she was confident we had a strong civil case for full recovery plus damages, and that depending on how the bank's fraud investigation proceeded, there was a meaningful possibility of criminal referral. I asked what I needed. She said, "Evidence of intent, if you can get it. The transfers alone prove the act, proving she understood what she was doing and did it deliberately. That's what makes this bulletproof." I had been thinking about that since I left the gas station. There is something that happens to you, I think, when you have spent years being the steady one, the one who doesn't make scenes, who absorbs things, who extends grace because you understand that people are complicated and families are messy and love requires patience. You develop a very specific kind of discipline. You know how to hold something painful without letting it show on your face. You know how to stay in the room. I had been practicing that discipline my entire adult life, mostly on behalf of my sister, and now I was going to use it in a completely different way. I called her. It was a Thursday evening, 10 days after Christmas. She answered warmly, the way she always did, and asked how my drive home had been and whether I'd gone back to work yet. We talked for a few minutes about nothing in particular. Then I said, casually, that I'd been thinking about finally making a move on a house and that I'd been looking at my savings to see where I stood. There was a half-second pause. So brief I might have missed it if I hadn't been listening for it. She said, "Oh, that's exciting. Are you serious this time?" I said I thought so. I said the account numbers were a little confusing to me and I wanted to make sure I was reading the balances correctly. I said I was going to have my cousin help me look it over that weekend. Another pause, slightly longer. She said, "Why would you need your cousin for that?" I said I trusted her with numbers stuff. Then I changed the subject. We hung up 20 minutes later. Within 2 hours, my cousin texted me a screenshot showing that someone had logged into the destination account from my sister's home IP address. They were not withdrawing money or moving it. They were checking whether it was still there. I forwarded the screenshot to my attorney. She responded within the hour. "That is exactly what I needed. We're filing Monday." I want to tell you about the moment I walked into my sister's house for the last time, because it matters that you understand I did not feel triumphant. I felt very tired and very clear. My attorney had advised me to do one final thing before we filed. Give my sister the opportunity to return the funds voluntarily. Not out of generosity, out of strategy. If she agreed to return the money, it would accelerate recovery and demonstrate to the court that she understood she had no legal claim to it. If she refused or denied it, that denial on record would make the civil case considerably more damaging for her. I drove to her house on a Sunday afternoon. I did not tell her why I was coming. I said I was passing through and wanted to see the kids. I sat at her kitchen island again, the same island where she had handed me coffee 10 days earlier, while $67,400 sat in an account she had opened without telling me. Her children ran in and out of the room. Her husband was watching football in the other room and barely acknowledged me. She made tea and put a plate of crackers between us and smiled her particular smile and asked if something was wrong because she said I seemed quiet. I took out my phone. I pulled up the transfer records from my bank, all 14 of them, and I set the phone on the counter so she could see the screen clearly. I said, "I need you to tell me where my money is." She looked at the phone, then she looked at me. Something shifted in her face, not guilt. Exactly. Something more calculated than that. She said she didn't know what I was talking about. I told her I had the transfer records, the destination account information, the IP address logs showing logins from her home network, and an attorney who had spent the past week organizing all of it. I told her that my bank's fraud investigation was already active and that I had a meeting on Monday morning. I told her she had the next 24 hours to transfer my money back, in full, if she wanted to do this without a courtroom. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I have turned over in my mind many times since. She said, "You've always had more than you needed, Clara. You've always been fine." I picked up my phone. I stood up. I said, "I'll see you Monday then." Her husband came into the kitchen as I was putting on my coat. He had clearly overheard something. He looked at my sister with an expression I couldn't fully read, part alarm, part something that looked almost like resignation, which told me things about what he knew and when he knew them that I did not have time to process in that moment. I nodded at him and walked out the door. I sat in my car in their driveway for a few minutes. I did not cry. I noticed I did not cry, and I thought that probably meant something about where I was in this process. Then I drove home. The civil filing went in Monday morning. My attorney had also submitted a referral letter to the district attorney's office with the supporting evidence, noting that the transfer pattern and the deliberate destination account setup suggested premeditated financial fraud rather than an impulsive misuse of account access. That distinction mattered legally. Impulse and planning are different things, and the evidence we had pointed toward planning. My sister hired an attorney. His first letter to my attorney suggested that as an authorized account holder, she had acted within her rights, and implied that a previous pattern of informal financial gifts from me to her over the years demonstrated a tacit agreement to share resources. I read that letter once, and then I added it to the folder where I was keeping everything, and I sent my own attorney the document I had compiled the night I came home from the gas station, 10 years of dates, amounts, and context. Not a single reciprocal transaction. The bank completed its fraud investigation 6 weeks later. They determined that the transfers were unauthorized based on the account terms and the absence of any documentation supporting a gift or loan arrangement. They reversed the transfers to the extent possible. Approximately $41,000 had already been moved again from the destination account into a third account, which complicated things and filed their own fraud report with law enforcement. My sister and her husband were served with civil papers on a Tuesday in February. My cousin texted me when she found out, because news moves quickly in our family, and she said, simply, "It's starting." I was at work. I was in the middle of a 12-hour shift. I went back to my patient and I did not check my phone again for 4 hours. What followed was not dramatic in the way you might expect. It was slow and procedural and often tedious. There were depositions. There was discovery. There were months where I got brief updates from my attorney, and nothing seemed to be moving, and I had to remind myself that legal processes run on their own calendar, regardless of how urgently you need them to resolve. I went to work. I ran in the mornings. I had dinner with my cousin every other Sunday. I did not speak to my sister. My parents were the hardest part of all of this. My mother called me crying twice in the first month. She said she couldn't believe I was doing this. That family doesn't take family to court. That I was going to destroy everything. I listened to her without interrupting. Then I told her, clearly and without anger, that her daughter had stolen $67,000 from me while I slept in her guest room on Christmas, and that I had given her the opportunity to return it voluntarily, and she had refused, and that I was not the one who had made the choice that led us here. My mother went quiet. She did not call back for 3 weeks. When she called again, she did not mention my sister. We talked about other things. It was a beginning of something, I think, though I don't know yet what it will become. My father said nothing. He has still, as of today, said nothing. I have chosen to let that be what it is. The civil case settled 8 months after filing. My sister's attorney made the first offer in June, roughly $45,000, framed as a good faith resolution. My attorney sent back a counter that outlined the full damages claim. The $67,400 principal, plus 8 months of lost investment returns calculated at a conservative rate, plus attorney's fees, plus emotional distress damages given the documented impact on my planned home purchase, which I had documented through the realtor correspondence and my mortgage pre-approval paperwork, both of which had since expired. The counter was for just over $91,000. They accepted. The settlement also included a clause requiring my sister to close the account that had received the transfers and to have no further access to any financial accounts in my name. My attorney suggested that clause. I did not think it would be accepted. It was. The criminal process moved separately and more slowly. I was not the one driving it. The DA's office worked from the bank's fraud referral and the materials my attorney had submitted. I was interviewed once by a detective who was methodical and thorough and did not tell me much about where things stood. I learned, through channels I won't detail, that my sister's husband had cooperated with investigators at some point during the process. I do not know exactly what that cooperation involved. My sister pleaded guilty to 1 count of computer fraud and 1 count of theft in the autumn of that year. She received 2 years of supervised probation, a fine, and a requirement to complete financial restitution to the extent not already covered by the civil settlement. She avoided jail time. I know some people reading this will think that is too light. I understand that. There are moments when I have thought it too. But I have also come to understand that what I wanted was never primarily punishment. It was recovery and acknowledgement. The civil settlement gave me the first. The guilty plea, the fact that she stood before a court and formally admitted that what she did was wrong and deliberate, gave me something close to the second. I bought my house in the spring. It is not the one I had found before Christmas. That listing had long since sold. It is a different house, in a slightly different neighborhood, with a backyard I did not expect to love as much as I do. The office is the small room at the end of the hall. I painted the bedroom facing the garden a shade of green I cannot fully describe, except that it is the exact color of early morning, in a way that makes me feel settled every time I wake up in it. My cousin helped me move in. We carried boxes up the steps and ordered pizza, and sat on the floor of the living room because the couch wasn't being delivered until Thursday, and she told me a story about her own family that I had never heard before, and I thought about how strange it is. The things people carry quietly. I thought about how much of our lives we spend protecting people who are not protecting us, because we have decided, without quite deciding, that loving someone means absorbing whatever they do. I don't believe that anymore. I'm not sure I believe it is love, actually, that particular kind of absorption. I think it can look like love from the outside, and feel like love from the inside, and still be something else entirely. I think sometimes it is just fear dressed up in the language of loyalty. I talk to my mother now on Sundays. We do not talk about my sister. My mother sent a plant for the new house, a small fiddle leaf fig in a terracotta pot, and I put it in the corner near the window, and it is doing very well. I have not spoken to my sister since the day I walked out of her driveway in January. I received a letter from her about a month after the sentencing. It was 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph explained her circumstances at the time, the private school tuition, the second car payment, something about an investment her husband had made that went badly, the pressures of the holidays, the way she had told herself she would pay it back before I noticed. The second paragraph said she was sorry. I read the letter once. I put it in a drawer. I have not opened the drawer since. I want to be honest with you about something, because I think it is the part of this story that is the hardest to say cleanly. I do not know if I will ever have a relationship with my sister again. There are days when I think the loss of what I believed we had is the actual injury, not the money, which I recovered, but the version of her I had been holding in my mind for 31 years, the one who stayed up with me before my boards and called every Sunday and would have had my back if I had truly needed her. That version of her was, in many ways, a collaboration between who she was and who I needed her to be. I did a lot of the work to maintain it. I looked away from things I should have looked at. I told myself stories that kept me comfortable and kept her protected. I don't have any interest in telling myself those stories anymore. What I have instead is a house with a green bedroom and a fiddle leaf fig and a cousin who moves boxes and a job that matters and savings that are mine, fully mine, with no one else's access and no one else's permission required. I have the knowledge that when the worst thing I could have imagined happening actually happened, I stayed calm and I documented everything, and I did not let grief make me reckless. I found out who I was on the other side of a betrayal, and she is steadier than I expected. That is enough. For now, it is more than enough. If there is anything I want you to take from all of this, and I'll leave it to you to decide whether it applies to your own life, it is this. The people who love you will not make you prove that you deserved what was taken from you. And if you ever find yourself in a room with someone who has done you genuine harm, and they are looking at you with that particular calm that says they expect you to let it go because you always let it go, remember that you are allowed to do something different this time. You built what you built. It belongs to you. And no one who truly loves you will ever try to convince you otherwise.